wanted to cover this is because this is going to be kind of the foundation of chapter 3. And so we're just going to introduce it, give yourself some time to practice and review that, and then starting next Thursday, we'll be hitting chapter 3 a little more. Also, reminder, if you haven't checked your Encore app this morning, I did assign this class Encore for next Wednesday, I believe, for the proficiency test. So if you have not passed, then you should have assigned Encore next Wednesday. So just keep that in mind. Get here as quick as you can next Wednesday at the beginning of Encore so you can get started right away. Okay. Because you will only have that 25 minutes. When time's up, it's up. Now, most people, when we tested the other day, didn't need more than 25 minutes. I mean, there was probably still 10 minutes on the clock, and most were turned in. But just a heads up, I don't want you to be stressed out. Okay, so today we're talking about parallel, perpendicular, and skew lines. And you should know what parallel and perpendicular lines are. Skew lines may be the new thing for today. And then we're going to talk about all the different angles that are formed when two lines are cut by a transversal. And you should have talked about those lines back in middle school at some point and talked about the angles formed. Those angles are called corresponding, alternate interior, alternate exterior, same side interior, and same side exterior. Do any of those words sound familiar? Hands up if you say yes. Okay, so a few people are saying, yeah, maybe I've heard that before. So that's the part that you should have been introduced to. I don't know what grade level, what class level, and if not, we're going to go through it so you'll understand today. All right, so lots of vocabulary here in this first section. Most of your vocabulary right here in this first section. So first thing is parallel lines. Parallel lines, what do you guys know about parallel lines? They never intersect. So what we're going to add to that in geometry is not only are they parallel lines that don't intersect, but they have to be coplanar. And that's not something often taught before this class. They have to be in the same plane and not intersect. They're going to be called something different if they are not coplanar and don't intersect. So parallel lines are coplanar and don't intersect. This is the symbol for parallel, and you may use it anytime that you want to. So you can abbreviate with symbols in here, only with symbols. So parallel, I'll often write them slanted like this, but the book does them straight up and down. All right, so if you look at this picture, for example, notice these little arrows and then these little arrows. Do you guys see those? What does that mean? Canyon? That the two lines are parallel. Why do these two only have one and these two have two? Andrew? Exactly. So they're trying to show you that these two are parallel, but they're not parallel to these two. So they'll use a different number of arrows to indicate lines that are parallel to each other. So anytime you see those little marks, that means they're telling you the lines are parallel. Don't forget to go back to chapter 1 in your mind. When you name things, you have to name them correctly. So if they ask you to list parallel lines, make sure you're naming your lines correctly with the arrows above, 2 capital letters, 2 points on the line. So AB is parallel to EF, and EG is parallel to FH. So part of your homework is simply going to be to name parallel lines by looking at a picture. Would AB and GH be parallel? Yes, they would. Is there a plane that could go through these diagonally, cutting through that shape, just kind of like going from the ceiling here through this room down to the floor? Yes. So these two lines are in the same plane and they're never going to intersect, so they are parallel. Be careful on this assignment that you don't just look at planes that are drawn, but you think about any plane that could exist. That's where they'll get you sometimes. They'll ask you if they're coplanar, but they haven't drawn the plane, but there could be a plane that goes through them. So AB and GH would be parallel. Okay, perpendicular. This is your symbol for perpendicular. They'll use that a lot. You can use it anytime you're using the word perpendicular. Perpendicular lines, what do you guys know about them? Okay, they intersect how? Okay, they form how many 90-degree angles? 4. So when two lines are perpendicular, they're going to intersect so that they form 4 right angles. Perpendicular lines intersect at 90-degree angles. Again, when you're looking at the picture, one way you can know for sure that they're perpendicular is they will put a right angle box in the picture. So you'll notice that there's some right angle boxes, so we know for sure that AB and AE are perpendicular, and EG and HG are perpendicular. Any questions about that? You want to be careful that you don't assume anything about your pictures. They are not drawn to scale, so don't assume anything. Go off your markings when you're naming things, okay? Only based off your markings. Okay, skew lines. This is probably the new thing. Skew lines are not coplanar. They do not lie in the same plane. Skew lines are not parallel, but they do not intersect. So because they are not in the same plane, they are not parallel, even though they don't intersect. Parallel lines have to be in the same plane. So an example of skew lines would be something like AE and FH. Will AE and FH ever intersect? No. AE is this line on the left side of the box. FH is the front vertical going up and down. They're never going to intersect. We're thinking 3 dimensions here, so think about a box. You're talking about this line and this line, right? Those are never going to intersect, but they're not in the same plane. Is there any way to make a plane that's going to contain all of FH and all of AE? No. So because they're not in the same plane and they don't intersect, we call them skew lines. Another example would be AB and EG. Can somebody give me a different pair of skew lines? Go ahead, Hannah. CG and FH. Very good. Anybody want to name a different pair? GE and what? GE and WH. Very good. Okay, so skew lines are not coplanar and they don't intersect. All right, and then parallel planes are going to be just like parallel lines, except we're talking about the 2-dimensional shape. So when you look at something like a box, you're going to have your top and bottom parallel, your left and right parallel, your front and back parallel. So parallel planes are planes that do not intersect. Just a reminder back to chapter 1, when you name a plane, you have to include the word plane, and then you pick 3 points in your plane. Only 3. Even if they name all 4 corner points on the quadrilateral, you only pick 3. So plane ABE is parallel to plane CDG. ABE would be the top plane up here, and CGD, actually, this should be a D, not a W. So CDG is talking about the bottom plane. So that's a top. Any questions here? All right, so we're going to do a couple examples. If you look at your notes, I would warn you to be very careful that you are naming correctly what they're asking you to name. Sometimes they're going to ask you to name segments. Remember, that means you're putting a segment above it. Sometimes they're going to ask you to name rays. That means you're putting a ray above it. Sometimes they're going to ask you to name lines, so you're putting a double arrow line above it. Watch your directions, okay? Name what they tell you to name. That little picky notation can cost you points. All right, but segments, rays, lines, they can all be parallel or skew or perpendicular. Okay, so first example here, we've got some cards stacked up to form a cube or looks like more like a rectangular prism. And so we need to name a pair of parallel segments, a pair of skew segments, a pair of perpendicular segments, and parallel planes. So let's go with Lucas. Can you give me a pair of parallel segments in the picture? Okay, they didn't mark them parallel, but because these are parallel, these are going to be parallel based on our shape. But again, look for those parallel marks to be guaranteed that you're not messing up. They'll give you a picture, I think on the homework, that's a little different and doesn't fit the normal. It's kind of like one of those crazy houses at a theme park where sometimes you walk in and it looks like you're taller or shorter or fatter or whatever. So they'll give you a picture and talk about a house like that. You want to make sure you're only using your markings because it's not going to fit the normal rules for building a room. Okay, so KL and NM would be parallel. But again, notice that we do have some parallel markings, so I would look for those. We've got them here, we've got them here, and that can guarantee that you're not making a mistake. Okay, give me a pair of skew segments. Let's go with Marcus. NK and RM, very good. NK, there's not a symbol for skew, so you can just put NK and RM or comma RM or however you want to write that, the word and. All right, a pair of perpendicular segments. Luke? LM and, I'm sorry, say it again. LM and what? And NM, okay. And again, they didn't give you a right angle box there, so they would be because this is a rectangular prism. But if you'll notice, they do give you some right angle boxes, so I would look for those, just especially when you get to some of the ones that may be not fitting the mold of a normal shape. So LM is perpendicular to MR. All right, and then parallel planes, Bryson. So planes that are parallel are planes that do not intersect, so just like your top and bottom, left and right, front and back. Okay, so I'm going to write what you said, plane PSR. So we're looking at the bottom plane down there would be parallel to plane, name the other one again, I'm sorry, Bryson. Okay. KNM. And again, you only need 3 letters, so just like Bryson only picked 3 letters, use your parallel symbols, make sure you put the word plane. Questions there? Okay, go ahead and do the next one on your own or with your partner, and then we'll check. This is probably my hair. Once you get an answer, compare with your neighbor and see if they agree with your answer and if you agree with their answer. Unless you did it together. Okay, let's check and see how you did. So let's go with Mason. Can you give me a pair of parallel segments? BF is parallel to EJ. Good job. How about a pair of skew segments, Madison? BF and JH. And again, we're doing segments, so make sure that you are putting line segments above them. A pair of perpendicular segments, Emily? I'm sorry, say it again. Not at all. So when you name a line segment, you can name them in either order. It doesn't make a difference. Perpendicular segments, let's go with Jacqueline. BC and BF. And a pair of parallel planes, Hunter. Very good. Plane BFJ is parallel to plane, and you said CDH. Any questions? Anybody not sure about their answer and want me to check their answer? Remy. Line BF and line GH for part B. Yes, BF and GH would be skew. Anybody else need me to check their answer? Any questions on parallel, perpendicular, skew, or parallel planes? Okay, would you agree this isn't too bad? Okay, not yet. All right, let's look at the next one. Flip your paper over. The last thing for today is to talk about 5 kinds of angles that are formed when 2 lines are cut by what's called a transversal. So a transversal is simply a line that intersects 2 coplanar lines at 2 different points. So if you look at this picture, which line is intersecting 2 other lines at 2 different points? Line T. Again, remember you can name lines by the little lowercase letters that are written out to the side. Those are not points on your line. They're just ways to name it. So we could say line T is the transversal because it's intersecting both line R and line S. So anytime you have a line that intersects 2 other lines, you can call that a transversal. When a line intersects 2 other lines, it forms 8 angles. In that picture, there are 5 different angle pairs that we're going to talk about. The first one is corresponding, an alternate interior, alternate exterior, same side interior, and this book leaves out same side exterior. I don't know why. We're going to add it to our notes. So same side, and I'm going to write it on the board over here because it is not wanting to write it at the bottom. So on the whiteboard, I am writing same side exterior. Okay, so we are not saying that these 2 lines have to be parallel. We're just saying any 2 lines cut by a transversal forms 8 angles. Next week, we're going to talk about what happens when those 2 lines happen to be parallel. Okay, but for today, they're not necessarily parallel. You just have 2 lines cut by a transversal. First kind of angles are corresponding angles. Corresponding angles lie on the same side of the transversal and on the same side of the lines. So they're in the same position is what I like to think of. When I think of corresponding, I think same position with respect to the lines. They're in the same position. So if you look, angles 1 and 5 are both to the left of the transversal, and they're both above R and S. Does everybody see how 1 and 5 are corresponding? So what would be another pair of corresponding angles besides 1 and 5? Luke? 2 and 6. Did you have a different pair over here, Remy? 4 and 8, angle 4 and angle 8. There's one more pair of corresponding. What are they? 3 and 7. Questions on corresponding angles? Okay, the next kind of angles are going to be alternate interior. The name right here is basically telling you where they are. Alternate interior angles are not adjacent. They lie on opposite sides of the transversal. So one's going to be on the left, one's going to be on the right. And they lie interior, so they're in between lines R and S. So first of all, when you think about the interior of this picture, 3, 4, 5, and 6 would all be interior angles. 1, 2, 7, and 8 would all be exterior angles. Alternate interior are going to be things like 3 and 6. They're on opposite sides of the transversal in between the two lines. What's the other pair of alternate interior? 4 and 5. Make sure you're putting angle symbols in front of them when you name them, not just listing the numbers 4 and 5. All right, alternate exterior, same idea. They're going to be on opposite sides of the transversal, but they're going to be outside of the lines R and S. So they say, for example, alternate exterior would be things like 1 and 8. Opposite sides of the transversal, outside the two lines. What would be another example? 2 and 7. Angle 2 and angle 7. Same side interior, basically what it says, same side interior also can be called consecutive interior angles. Those are interchangeable words. They are simply angles that lay on the same side of the transversal, but they're between lines R and S. So they say, for example, 3 and 5. What would be another pair? 4 and 6. And then you're going to add same side exterior to your notes. They can also be called consecutive exterior angles. And they are simply angles that lie on the same side of the transversal, but they are outside lines R and S. So can you give me an example of same side exterior? 1 and 7, they're on the same side of the transversal, but they're outside the lines R and S, or 2 and 8. So angle 1 and angle 7, or angle 2 and angle 8. Any questions? Yes, sir. So you studied these for the test you just took instead of chapter 2? That could be a problem. Well, now you'll be ready for chapter 3, right? You are just ahead of the game. That's what it is. All right, here we go. Give an example of each angle pair. So we need a pair of corresponding angles. Anybody? Corresponding. 1 and 5. So 1 and 5, remember, corresponding are on the same side of the transversal, and they're in the same position with respect to the other lines. So they are both above the lines and to the left of the transversal. So angle 1 and angle 5. Alternate interior, somebody different. Luke. Be careful, 4 and 5 would be on the same side of the transversal. We want them to be alternate, which means we want them on opposite sides. So 4 and what, Luke, would be alternate interior? 4 and 6. Angle 4 and angle 6. Alternate exterior, somebody different. Emily. 2 and 8. Same side interior, somebody different. Okay. Angle 4 and angle 5. And then I want you to add E. Same side exterior. Don't abbreviate on your homework, but I am right here on the notes. Same side exterior. So Jocelyn, can you give me same side exterior? 2 and 7. Questions so far? Try the next one on your own or with your partner. I love that I'm seeing a lot of you go ahead and add part E, same side exterior. If you didn't do that, go ahead and do that so that you are finding the last one as well. Emma, can you give me corresponding angles part A? Angle 1 and 3. B, Lorena, can you give me alternate interior? Angle 3 and angle 6. Jordan, can you give me alternate exterior? Angle 1 and angle 8. Lena, same side interior. Be careful, 5 and 8 would not be interior. There you go. Angle 2 and angle 3. And what would 5 and 8 be? Same side exterior. So I'm going to go ahead and put those down here. Angle 5 and angle 8. Any questions on the ones you wrote down? Not sure if what you had was correct. Okay, last example is just a little bit harder. They're going to ask you to identify which line is the transversal for the given angle pair. They're going to give you two angles and they want to know which one must be the transversal for that picture. Here is a little hint that will help you if you're struggling identifying which one's the transversal. Determine which line is the transversal by simply locating the line that connects the vertices. So pick out the two angles they give you, find their vertices, and whatever line connects those two vertices must be the transversal. For example, if you look at this picture, notice that all three lines are intersecting. So every line is actually intersecting two other lines, which means they're all transversals. But what they want to know is what is the transversal for this angle pair? Sorry. This is actually okay, so 1 and 3. So if you look at angle 1 and angle 3, they want you to name which line is the transversal that creates angles 1 and 3. So which line's the transversal? Line L. And if you're not sure, locate the vertex for angle 1, locate the vertex for angle 3. The line that connects those two vertices is the transversal. So line L connects those two vertice points. Okay, now you need to classify those angles. So it says identify the transversal and then classify the angle pair. That means what kind of angles are angles 1 and 3? Corresponding. And sometimes this gets confusing for students, so I would tell you cover up everything else you're not using and then look at just this transversal and these two lines to like right here. Then you can see that they are on the same side of the transversal and they're both to the left of these two lines. So we would call those corresponding because they're in the same position. Okay, how about 2 and 6? Okay, first of all, what line is the transversal for 2 and 6? So the line that connects them is line what? N. Goodness, I've got to get this fixed. Line N. And what kind of angles are 2 and 6? Alternate interior. Again, look at just these lines and angles, ignore 3 and 4. Notice that they are in between these two lines, so they're interior, and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. Do not abbreviate, even if the book does. Alternate interior. Last ones, 4 and 6. What's the transversal? Line M. And so 4 and you said 6, right? So 4 and 6 would be alternate exterior. Questions on this one? Okay, pretty easy today? All right. If you